This conference will now be recorded.
Hi. So in the last class we discussed creation of the try catch block, right? So now we are using the nested try catch block. So how we can use? So now we are going to discuss the yesterday's class. So this is the try and this is the catch. So once we get an exception, for example, at line number 8, the exception is got. So the line number 9, it will not execute. So once we get an exception, the catch block is going to handle the exception. So the particular exception is not handled by this catch block, is going to check the superclass exceptions. So in two exception cases, so two catch cases, so the superclass exception is not handled, the particular exception is not handled. So what is going to do? In Java, we have a built-in catch blocks. So there they execute, like they provided the superclass exception, that is an exception class. So there the exception is going to handle. So this is the behavior of catch block. So what is the behavior it is? So once we get an exception in the try block, so the appropriate catch block is going to execute to handle the exception. So if the appropriate catch block is not handling the exception, so that by default we have a catch block to handle the exception in Java. So so if the Java is going to handle the exception, so we are going to like the user cannot understand the exception, so which purpose the exception is called. So that's the reason we need to handle the exception in our Java code, so that the user can understand the user, so by seeing the message of the exception. So this is the this is the purpose of the catch block. So now we are going to see the inside the try blocks. Again we are going to write one more try block. So how we can write the nested try blocks? So just I'm writing the define, like the syntax of the try block. So this is the syntax. So because this try is open here and close here, inside the try, again we write the try and catch. Again we write the try and catch. So this is the syntax of the nested try blocks, we can call it as. So how we can implement this nested try block? So here what I'm trying to say here, so once we in the catch try blocks, if we get an exception, is going to handle the here. So if the exception is not handled in nested catch block, it's going to check the outer catch block. Outer catch block. In outer catch block also it's not fine. So what is going to do? In Java we have a default catch blocks, right? So here they provide the exception only direct. So here the top class exception is going to handle. So this is the way. So this information is defined in Java built-in exception classes. So once the Java built-in exception is executed, we cannot identify the exception information. So which purpose the exception is got. So this is the way of executing the nested try blocks. So we'll see an example. Here I am writing try block. So What? So this is the normal try block. This is the normal try block. Again, here I'm printing the A value. I'm printing the A value. So here we need to use A. See, if in case at line number 6 any exception is occurred, so the line number 7 will not execute. So this is we will see in our the command line. So in the command line output we will see. So the A value is going to print or not once we get an exception. See, now I am defining one more try block. See, this try block not ended anywhere because inside the try block I am going to write one more try block. So here what I am trying to write here is if A equal to 1, so what I am doing here is, so this is the inside the try block. This is the inside the try block. I am writing one catch block call. See, so this is the up to here to here. This is the nested try and catch block we defined, right? So up to here is the nested catch and try block. So what I'm trying to say here, if A is equals to 1, the A value is 1, So because what these values coming from length of the these arguments, this length of the arguments. So at first time the length of the arguments is 0. So the length will be 0. So here int a int b 42 divided by a. So what it's going to do? So this catch block is going to handle, because at line number 6 only we might get an exception. At line number 6 only we might get an exception. That's the reason this catch block is going to handle the exception. And if the value and the system.out.println method is not going to print it on the console. So we observe if we get an exception at particular case, so the below lines of code is not going to executed. Below lines of code is not executed. So because of this, the arithmetic exception block is going to handle. So in case some values we got it like a is equal to 3, 4. So in case a value is going to print, again it's enter into the try block. If a is equal to 1, so we are dividing again. And if a is equal to 2, so what it's saying here, it is integer one array is going to created. Integer one array is going to created with the values 1, because int array, so the value is going to assign into the 0 index. At 0 index we have a 1 value, but what we are doing at 42 index we are assigning to 99, because we don't have a 42 index, because only one 0 index is created. Like this is the 1, 2, 3, like this is the 42. For example, I am defining here, but we don't have a 42 index at all, because we have only one, that is in 0 index. The value is 1. At line number 14 is trying to insert the value and 42 index the 99 value. So it's trying to insert 42 index the 99 value, but we don't have the 42 index. So because of this catch block is going to execute. Because of this, the catch block is going to execute. So now we will see an example how it's going to look like. So compile the exception one class. So it's compiled successfully. Java exception one. So outer catch block is saying, see, outer catch block. So why outer catch block is came? See, outer catch block where we define. So this catch block is executed. This catch block is executed. So why this catch block is executed means, so the length of the characters is 0. So because a value is 0, we are trying to multiply some value. So that's the reason the outer catch block. So at line number 6, we got an exception. So this in nested try and this nested block will not execute, right? Once we get an exception, so the below lines of code is not going to execute it. So for this, it's executed. And so this message also is not printed. You see the console, so there is no message, just outer catch block. See, so I given some value, a value 1, outer catch block is executed. So why outer catch block is executed? Because see the value here, what is happening again. So because here we got an a value how much 1, because one value I given. So this value I given 2. So because the length of the string it become 1. It's become 1. So now open the, so here a equal to 0. This condition is true. So again what we are doing here is equal a by a minus 1 we are doing, right? So again if you see some multiplication, again we got in this place we got an exception. So this is a exception. This exception only we got. So see this, and this message is we got an exception in the nested try block, but the exception handle in outer cache block. Here the exception is got line number 11 because it is this line is defined inside the nested try and catch block, right? So as I said, so if we get an exception, is going to check this particular catch block. So this catch block is not related to this exception because this catch block is related to line number 14. Line number 14 we define for the, in might be in future line number 14 we got an exception. So this catch block is going to handle. But at line number 11 only we got an exception. So for this we did not handle the catch block. So is going to check the outer cache block. So here we got an we are handling the particular exception. So this is the flow of execution nested and cache block. Now we will add one more length of string. So see the output. If we observe the a value 2 and inside the nested catch block is executed. A value 2. So these values are printing this system.out println executing on the console and a value 2. If a value 2, so this condition is going to true. This condition is going to true. So we are expecting at C42 we don't have an index, right? So the integer array we don't have the 42 index, but we are trying to insert the value how much 92. So that's the reason this exception got occurred. What is an exception? Array index out of bound exception. So this message is printed on the console inside the nested catch block. See, so inside the nested catch block is printed. So this is the value of message. This is the message of the nested catch block. So this is the way we can define nested catch, try and catch blocks. So we explain like when we start our exception handling. So as of now we completed try and catch keywords. Now we have a remaining 3 keywords, right? So now in this we will see the throw keyword, how the throw keyword is going to work. So now what we are doing, if we get any exception we are handling into the catch block, we are handling into the catch block. But again, so using this throw keyword we can throw an exception from our Java code, we can throw an exception. So we might think, so is it required to throw an exception? Because we doesn't know when the exception is going to come, so we can handle the exception. But in some situation the developer needs to throw an exception. So how the developer can throw an exception? For example, so we have a one application. So here we are entering some username and password. Some username and password. So the user enter the like username is correct, the password is done. So if the user enters the username correct and password is wrong, so we need to like send a message to the user, the username and password is incorrect. So how we can send a message? So using the throw keyword, we can send the message. So that's the reason the throw keyword is going to work. So this is a simple example, but in our real-time application we have a lot of scenarios we can define where we can like run throw an exception. Because so in my some cases, so 502 errors, 404 errors, 401 errors, some server related errors. So we have a lot of exceptions in it will we need to throw an exception. So that's the reason this keyword is going to use to throw an exception. So we will see one example how we can throw an exception. Example of throw an exception. Example of throw keyword. So what is the class name here? So we are defining the class name as a throw demo. So here what I am doing, so just I am defining one method here. So I am defining method. So inside the method I am trying to throw an exception. So I am trying to throw an exception. So if you are throwing exception, we need to write within the try catch block, or else we have one more method. So using the throws keyword. Now we are handling using the try catch block. So simply I'm writing so null point exception. Simply I'm writing null point exception here. So because so if you want to throw the username password related, we need to create lot of code for this. So this is the in null point exception is defined by some people. So just for our understanding purpose, I'm using null point exception here. So once we throw, we need to handle the catch block. Here we need to write the same exception, null point exception, and here we need to rethrow the exception. So, this is the message we define. Just simply throwing an exception. Because so how we can throw an exception using the throw keyword. So once we call this demo prop method inside the once we is trying to execute, again is going to throw an exception. The particular exception is going to handle here. So here again what we are doing, we are rethrowing an exception on this same exception we are rethrowing. So why we are rethrowing means, so we need to send these like exception related information to the UI like end user. So that's the reason we are rethrowing an exception here. So now defining the uh, like main method. So here I'm calling the the particular method which is defined. So here, so once we are calling any method, so because by seeing these lines of code, we might got an exception, right? Because this is throwing an exception. So once it's throwing an exception, as part of Java standard, we need to handle the exception or we need to throw the exception. Now what we are doing here, so just we are handling the exception here. We are handling the exception. So we want to write the exception message method inside the try block. Inside the try block. So and once we got an exception, so here we are handling the exception. How we are handling the see, I will like explain the example. So from here we are calling the method. From here we are calling the method. So so as of now we know that whenever we are trying to execute, the main method is going to execute first time. So after that, this method, the demo proc is going to execute because the demo proc we provided the information totally in the try catch flag. So so when we writing any method like it's for example, I am deleting. So compile. So we get a compilation exception. So what is showing here? 1 second. So save first. So at compilation we did not get any exception. Run our example. See, caught inside the demo prop, the exception is came. Like testing what we given here, it's executing, right? So so this is the way we can throw an exception. But but so these caught inside the demo prop, we handle we provided the some system.order message, right? Some message we provided. So at throwable demo prop main at line number 14. So by seeing the error struck message, we can observe so how the method is executed, how this exception is got. So see at throw demo main line number 14 is called, and throw demo line number 5 the exception got occurred. See, so line number 14 we are trying to call a method. At line number 5, so this we are throwing an exception. So seeing the exception track, we can identify so how the method is called, how the exception is occurred. Right now, what we are doing here it is, so here we are handling the exception because these so we are throwing an exception that needs to handle somewhere. So that here we are handling. Let's see now see the difference messages. compiled successfully and executed. See the different. See the difference. So because before handling an exception, these lines of message we got. So once we handle it, we got only one line of code, one line of message, one line of message. So that's the reason I provided try catch plus inside the main method to make the exception information user friendly. So by seeing this, so we cannot identify, because as a developer we can identify so how this exception is called, but as a user we cannot identify. So see the difference in exception messages. So the lines of code is different and the execution track is different. So this is the way we can handle we can throw the exception. So once we throw an exception, we can handle the exception using the try catch block. So this is the important topic using the throw keyword. Now we will see one more one, that is an throws. That is an throw. So the throw is just simple because so this method can throw an exception at runtime, throw an exception runtime. So the method, the throws related, exception related information we are not handling. So what we can do, throws null point exception. So like we can throw in a multiple exception, like we can define multiple exception at method level. So as of now we doesn't know this method is going to throw or not. So if it is throw, we have a handler method, we are going to handle it in the main class. If it is not throwing, so the catch block will not execute, right? If it is throw, it come to the catch block. It's trying to execute, right? So what we need to define? So we need to remove this logic and we need to write our own logic, what we need, like which purpose the method we return, so we can define the logic. So this is the way the throws keyword is going to work. So see the difference throw and throws. So we will see an example how the throws is going to work. We're doing the same method to throw an a to like to throw a null point exception or it is an exception. Now what I'm doing here is clear the screen and execute the throw java c throw demo.java. So what is showing? Unreported exception must be caught or declared to be thrown. Demo proc. Okay. unreported exception. This unreported exception line number 10. Where, okay. So it's showing an exception. So why we got an exception? Because here we are throwing a two types of exception. Here we are handling only one. So we need to handle the one more one. Okay. So recast is exception in java.lang null point exception. So here what is happening? Because we made the string s is equals null, and we are trying to get the length of the string, because the string by default is in a null. String by default it is in null. So again we are calling, like we are finding the length of the character, so it might be null. So is going to throw an exception. So the exception is handled here at so method level. The method we handle it in the main class. So this is the way we can define. So here we did not write any try catch block or throw. So this is the different way. So just we can define the exception. If in case it's going to exception, so the particular catch block is going to execute. So record the exception. Record the exception. We got a message also, right? Record exception. So that is in java.lang exception. So if we define your own exception, so the exception information also here we can print it. So this is the way we can write throws keyword. So these are the force keyword completed. So try, catch, and throw, and throws. Now we have it, the final keyword. It is a final keyword. Is a finally, right? So how we can write a finally? So the final come to the from here. The finally executed here. Just we can define clear the screen, throw demo.java, and execute the throw demo. See, so once we get an exception, again the finally block is calling. So once we get an exception, so the finally block is calling, right? So what I'm trying to say here is, so in case if the exception is called, so the exception block is executed as well as the final block is executed. So so if at the line number 14 the demo block method is not like getting an exception, so try block successfully executed, and the catch block will not execute because we don't have a exceptions. As of now we don't have exceptions not yet occurred. So again the final block is executed. So I am going to write the steps if exception occurs. if exception occur. So the catch block and finally block. So these lines of code is going to execute it. So in this, it is a null pointer exception or it is an exception. So because the particular exception is occurred, the null pointer is going to execute it in the particular catch block. Otherwise, the exception is going to catch. So and the final block is executed. Not if the catch try block is executed successfully. If the try block is executed successfully, so the finally block also executed. Finally block also executed. So in the both cases, the finally block is going to execute. If the exception is occurred or non-occurred, the finally block is executed always. So this is the purpose. So we can use. So again, we get in some doubt. So if every time is going to executing, so what is the use of finally block? So the use of main. So in if you are running the file related application, so file related application means we have a two classes like file input stream. So and so file output stream. These are the two classes and like use it to open a file or closing the file. So for opening closing related information, we can write inside the finally block. If the exception is occurred, so we need to close the file. If the not exception is occurred, the execution is successfully completed, so without getting an error. So otherwise, in this case also we need to close the finally block. So in the both case, so we need to close the file related information. So those information we can write inside the finally block. So this is the purpose the finally block is executing. So this is the 5 keywords which is available in Java. So how we can write the exception and handling the exception, and we can rethrowing an exception. So using these 5 keywords. So now, so in Java we have some exception classes list. So what are the classes list we need to identify? So as I said, some of the class like exception classes are provided by some people. So what are the classes? So first one is automatic exception, array index out of bound exception, null point exception, and class exception, illegal arguments. So illegal access, illegal argument exception, and illegal state of exception, illegal state of an exception, illegal state of exception, and some other exceptions also available. So those are concerned except this null point exception. So except these null point exception. So these are the checked exception. So these are the checked exception. As I said, we have a two types of exceptions, right? So like checked exception and unchecked exceptions. So these are comes under the subclass of exceptions. So we have and some other exception list. So just you can Google it, you will find it the exception like checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. So this is the uh, class exception handling. So how we can handle the exception. So these all information is completed. So just do the practice and write your own exceptions so that it is easy to develop the real-time applications using the exception handling. So we will see tomorrow one important concept called collections. So how we can use the collections, what are the ways and what is the purpose. So we have a it's very important concept and it is very useful in each and every application if you are developing any real-time application. So don't miss tomorrow. So tomorrow is the important class. So we will see you tomorrow.